What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Aftersound here, bringing you Splinterlands content daily. We also stream over on Twitch at This Is Aftersound, as well as on this channel Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sunday mornings, U.S. time. So come by and say hello. Okay, I wanted to get into something that is way out there. This is speculation based on something that Matt had brought up in a previous town hall. And if or when it gets implemented, it's still going to be a while down the road. Now, a part of this is going to be dependent on there being a stable coin or stable token, which is going to be going to be DEC from the looks of it, or at least from what the team has been saying so far. But we need to see how things shake out for DEC in the long run. And I guess in the long run is like 3 to 6 months. We'll see what happens with DEC. But in terms of this getting implemented, I think it may be a while. Now, hopefully it comes in sooner because it sounds fascinating. But, like I said, this is just based off of a small mention in a town hall that Matt had brought up. And that is lending. What lending could look like in the Splinterlands ecosystem. Now, we rent our cards out, and so that's like a form of lending, for example, but we're getting money for it, and it's not exactly the same thing as what traditional lending or what lending in, the crypto markets or just in NFTs or assets would look like. So the easiest way that I can explain this is if you have an asset, you can post it up for collateral, right? And so this is different from like renting out your cards. You can post an asset up for collateral. You still own the asset, but you can be paid by a bank or an algorithm or a system or a protocol that will give you X amount based on the value of your asset. And then you can take that loan, which is usually not taxable, right? So loans are, whenever you borrow money, it's not taxable, but you can take that money, reinvest in certain other things, use it to pay off expenses, whatever the case is, and then pay down the loan over time. So the most common way that you'll see this, at least from like an everyday perspective, is somebody taking out a home equity line of credit. So if you own your home, then you can borrow against it essentially, and get money that way. So what does this look like? I'm going to throw out some hypothetical numbers. Let's say you own a home and it's worth $100,000 to make it easy. So that home is $100,000. Now, a bank will come in. And again, these are just funny numbers here to keep it simple. But like a bank will come in and say, you own this house. This house is valued at about $100,000. So we will give you what they call like a 25% loan to value ratio, meaning that we are willing to loan you a $25,000 based on the $100,000 value of your home. And you can take this $25,000, you can pay us, whatever the interest rate over time is. And essentially it's just like your credit. Like you have this available to you at any time. Whenever you use it, you have to pay it down. Any balance that you don't pay down at the end of the month ends up being, or interest is applied to it. And, in the crypto world, you can see a lot, like there's a lot of loans available for crypto. There's a lot of things popping up that have very interesting and competitive interest rates, for example. So, Celsius is one of the platforms that I'm familiar with, where you can take a 25% loan to value ratio on your crypto, and then you pay 1% interest on it, which is kind of crazy to think about, right? Like 1% is nuts. But the thing is, the assets vary wildly in price. So with a home, it's much safer. Your home isn't going to lose 30% value on a tweet from Elon Musk or, China banning something. So that's much, it's much more stable. And that's why home equity lines of credit are very popular. But when it comes to other assets, those can, I should say, not tend to fluctuate in value, which is where the risk comes in. Because, for example, and again, I'm just throwing out numbers here. Let's say, your house is worth $100,000 and they give you a 25% loan to value ratio. What they're also going to give you is what they would call a liquidation number, right? So if your home were to drop in value below a certain number in value, so then they would essentially take your home. They would own your home, or they would own your assets. They would own your crypto. They would own whatever that you posted up as collateral. So that's where the risk comes in. Now, what happens when, the reason that is so risky is that people will tend to take a loan out against their assets to try and buy more of their assets when it's down or something, hoping that it will go up, right? So, they borrow X amount of dollars, they invest it when it's low, their asset increases in value, and then they are able to, also sell whatever they borrowed, or they use it for something else. So how does this apply to cards, and how does this apply to Splinterlands? So I'm going to keep this simple with cards for right now. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of other assets within Splinterlands when land gets introduced. I don't know if like nodes would be something that would fall under this category, but when it comes to cards, it's easier for me to see at this point in time, and therefore kind of like extrapolate on what it would look like. So in the same way, cards have a certain value right now, and you can see here, just looking at the market, all these different values for cards. So let's say we were to apply that 25%, loan to value ratio. I mean, that could essentially be, somebody comes in and says, hey, I have an Archmage Arius. I want to, take a loan out against it. So I'm going to take an $8,000 loan, right? It's listed at $32,000. I'm going to take an $8,000 loan against my card, and I am going to. So essentially, I would get paid. I don't own this. Just to be clear, I don't own this card, but it's like if it's valued at $32,000, I could take $8,000, and then I could do whatever I wanted to do with it. Right. And ideally, that's going to be paid out in DEC if DEC is the stable coin that's used. And so therefore, if it's paid out in DEC, then I'm going to get $8,000 worth of DEC. I can either put it to work in other aspects of the game, or I can withdraw it from the game and, pay off some bills, buy some things, or make another investment. And then when I'm ready to pay it off, whether the loan is 3 months, 6 months, 5 years, however, whatever the terms of the loan are, or it could be something that's ongoing, right? A lot of times, even if you set a loan term for X amount of time, all you're doing is like guaranteeing that, yes, I'm going to pay the interest rate for those 6 months, even if I pay back the loan earlier than that. But, the thing is, when it comes to cards like Archmage Arius or Prince Julian, which obviously are the two highest cards here, there's only one card for sale. And so how do you determine what the true value of this is? And to me, the value of a card is not in what the listing price is, but what somebody is willing to pay for it, right? And so that's where things get a little tricky. So I would actually say, if I did have an Archmage Arius, I would never take a loan against it, because what happens if, you have your loan to value ratio of 25%, let's say at 50%, right? So if the asset that you're putting up for collateral, which would be the Archmage, falls in value 50%, then they take your Archmage Arius, right? Because as just a liquidation to protect themselves, the lender, in this case, it would be probably the team, or maybe, actually, no, it probably wouldn't be the team. It might be, well, here's where it gets interesting, because if it's an open decentralized platform, then it might be anybody, right? Like I may be able to offer loans on, like where you post something up for collateral. And now here's where the nefarious thing can happen. So for example, let's say I do own an Archmage Arius, right? There's only 87 in existence. So let's say I do own one, and then you post one up for collateral, and I say, okay, I'm going to go ahead and I will give you a loan for that. I'm going to give you $8,000, of which, you can pay it back to me whenever you can, like according to our thing. And then I go ahead and I list my one for rent at $16,000. And now all of a sudden, the algorithm looks at this and says, hey, there's one for $16,000, meaning that this has fallen down 50% in value. We're going to liquidate this other person. And all of a sudden, I take mine off the market, and now I have two Archmage Ariuses. I lost $8,000, right? Well, I didn't lose $8,000. I essentially gained an Archmage Arius for $8,000. Do you get what I'm saying? So that's where things could get really tricky, and I would stay away from that. When it comes to the newer sets, though, these prices tend to be much more uniform and consistent. You look at something like, these Untamed Summoners, for example. Now, the prices have obviously fluctuated very highly in value, but from a uniformity standpoint, a lot of these prices and values are much closer together. And it's not like, someone can necessarily come in and crazily undercut the market. Obviously, it's not going to be a situation where like one, if I list mine for $1, then I liquidate anybody that's loaning out on this. It's probably going to be some kind of average, the algorithm is probably going to take some kind of average of what the total values that are put in here and maybe remove any outliers, right? Because you might have, if you look at this is like the dollar per BCX rather than the overall price, 300, 336, 399, like all of these are relatively close to one another. And then you got someone here who's like $1,000 per BCX or $900. So again, it's going to have to be thought out and planned and programmed, I should say, in a very, very thoughtful way. But when it does come through, it could look like that. And, maybe even Untamed is a bad example, right? Because there's just so few in circulation compared to the Chaos Legion. I'm sorry. lost my train of thought for a second. So, something like this, for example, where it's just like, okay, like, I'm able to borrow $20 based on Dr. Blight being around $80, for example. Or, and this is on a much higher level, maybe what ends up happening to kind of protect yourself from a one-off risk is you look at your overall value of your portfolio and you take a loan out against your entire portfolio. Because, if you own a lot of cards at that point, right? And I don't know, like, let's actually see what my portfolio is valued at. So my entire card collection is listed at $4,500 US, right? Using listing prices, $4,600 using market prices. So, and I own a bunch of different cards here. So at that point in time, like it probably make more sense for me to take a loan out against this, right? And 25% would be like $1,000+. But nobody would be able to come in and crash my entire portfolio, because then they would have to look at all of the different cards that I own, right? And then crash those individually. So actually that might be where things, make the most sense overall. Maybe taking it out against your portfolio or a portion of your portfolio. So just something to think about. Again, this is all speculation, and it's not necessarily a deep dive into what will happen, but it's one of those things of like, if it were to come through and if they were to implement something like this, what would it look like and how would it work? And so I'm excited for it. Again, this was just like a casual mention by Matt during one of the most recent town halls as something they'd like to do from a DeFi perspective. But if it were to come in the next year, 2 years, 5 years, that would be something that's really cool, because hopefully what we are doing across, or during that time is building up our asset collections and slowly, introducing more and having more assets across the board. So that's all I have in this video. Let me know your thoughts, though, if this is something that had even crossed your mind, if this is something that you're excited about, if I made sense in explaining all of it. I know I went kind of deep with some of the finance terms in there, but I tried to distill it down as much as I could, and if I didn't, I apologize. But to me, I'm excited about it. If there's something that ends up happening with this, like, we own all of our assets in the game, which is what makes things super exciting. And so having ownership means that we can do some pretty cool things, in my opinion, from a DeFi perspective, as we're seeing innovation all over the space. And I'm not the only one excited, because obviously Matt is, if he was bold enough to mention this on a recent town hall. So let me know your thoughts. I will catch you all in the next video, and I will see you around the game. Take care.